Hello, everyone. I'm Lana Zach. Thank you for joining us. The body of civil rights icon Congressman John Lewis is lying in state at the U.S. Capitol building. His body arrived this afternoon in Washington, D.C. His procession stopped at landmarks in the nation's capital, including the Martin Luther King Jr. Monument and the Black Lives Matter Plaza. For most of his life, John Lewis spent it fighting for voting rights and equality for all people. He joined the civil rights movement as a college student. He was the youngest speaker at the March on Washington, which he helped to organize. Lewis led a peaceful protest from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery, and the brutal crackdown by police on the Edmund Pettus Bridge came to be known as Bloody Sunday. Lewis was invited by then-President Lyndon B. Johnson for the signing of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Joining us now, Congressman Jim Clyburn. He was a longtime friend of Lewis. Congressman, it is a privilege to have you on the show, and I also want to offer my condolences on the loss of your friend.
Thank you.
You want Congress to rename the Voting Rights Act after Congressman Lewis. Talk to our viewers about that, please.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Today, we passed unanimously in the House a resolution to rename what was H.R. 4, the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act. And that's gone over to the Senate. Now, I understand last week, Senator Leahy proposed making a correction to the bill in the Senate, because it's already there, and to do the same. So I'm hopeful that the Senate will take that bill up, because the House has already passed it, and will send it to the president. And it will be to make right what the Supreme Court told us we needed to do. 7 years ago, the United States Supreme Court took a look at the 1965 Voting Rights Act and decided that the formula in Section 4 that triggers Section 5 of that act, called preclearance, they wanted us to update the formula. So John Lewis, Jim Sensenbrenner, and several others went around the country. Marcia Fudge led hearings in various places around the country, gathering additional data. And we used that data to formulate, or put together a new formula. And that's what's in this law. And so we've done exactly what the Supreme Court told us to do. House has passed it, Senate should pass it, and the president should sign it.
Indeed. And I know that you collaborated with Congressman Lewis on several issues. And one of the ones that came up in more recent years was gun control. I'm wondering what other acts of legislation you intend to carry on, or the fight for justice that was such the hallmark of Congressman Lewis's legacy there on Capitol Hill and across the country, that you'll intend to carry on in his honor.
Well, John and I, as you probably know, met almost 60 years ago, October 1960. And our lives have intersected ever since. And since I've been in the Congress, and we've served together for 27 years here, we have always collaborated on various pieces of legislation. And I can think of only one subject matter that we were not always in sync on, and that's when it came to defense funding. You know, I represent Fort Jackson and Charleston Air Force Base, all those military installations down there in Charleston. And so I was always, in Sumter, my hometown, is the headquarters for the 3rd Army and the 9th Air Force. So John and I would respectfully disagree when it came to defense funding. But almost every other piece of legislation we've ever had, we were in sync on. And you mentioned the gun resolution. Remember, after the Charleston incident at the Emmanuel AME Church, we put up a piece of legislation to close what we call the Charleston Loophole. That's just to say that you ought not be able to sell a gun to anybody until the background check has been completed. But under the current law, if you take 3 days and you don't complete the background check, the person can get the gun anyway. That's how that young man got the gun to kill all those people, 9 folks down in the Emmanuel Church. We worked together to close that loophole. And it was kind of interesting because other gun legislation would come up, and John led, I would dare say, his final sit-in on the floor of the House. We sat down and stopped the works of the House, called him for some sensible gun legislation. Well, we were not successful, but John never gave up. As you always say, he never gave out. And so he did that right up until the end. It's kind of interesting that night, though, because we started getting phone calls from all over the country. People as far away as Richmond, Virginia, up in Philadelphia, they got in their automobiles and came down here to the Capitol and said to us, don't let up the floor, stay there, we're on our way. And around 2 o'clock in the morning, I think it was, we came out of the Capitol building, and the ground to the Capitol were full of people who had gotten in their automobiles and had come from all over, up and down the East Coast. That's how much respect people had for John. And that's how much he fought right up until the end. And there he was, just a few days before going home for the final time, going out to Black Lives Matter Plaza, stood with the mayor of Washington, D.C., and we talked about that. He told me how fearful he was that this current iteration of civil rights efforts, Black Lives Matter, could go the way that SNCC did, the one that we had back in the 60s. We lost that battle to a headline, Burn, Baby, Burn. And so John was concerned when he heard defund the police. And he said to me on the floor one day, that's the same kind of slogan that could undercut this effort, like Burn, Baby, Burn, undercut ours. And that's why the two of us were speaking out so forcefully, asking people, don't let a headline get in the way of headway. And so that's why you heard us speaking out.
I like that quote. I've been reading quotes from your esteemed colleague since his passing, and I'll leave us with one last one. Every generation leaves behind a legacy. What that legacy will be is determined by the people of that generation. And you are helping to cement that legacy for him. Congressman Jim Clyburn, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.